I live in central Massachusetts, once occupied by Nipmuc Nation. We also invite you to find where you might be calling in from. This is a native land map. There is a link there that I can drop into the chat in a moment. At NOFAMAS, we aim to make our racial equity statement a living document that drives our work to heal the harm that racism has caused in the food system, and we urge you to act as allies to our BIPOC communities. We'd like to thank our sponsors. So we have a number of businesses who help to make our work possible. They help to fund the conference and all the staff time that goes into making the conference. So we hope that you will support them and let them know that you appreciate their support of NOFAMAS. So our presenters, Pampi, uses they, them pronouns, is a 20+ year newcomer settler of Turtle Island, currently in residency at Northern Grace Farm. Pampi is the non-binary, second-generation casteD-Bengali culture worker, third eye fell, who plays with popular education to develop community-centered art that releases creative potential and drives change-making. They lean on poetry and dance theater in divine company to help message the shifts in thinking we must embrace to center liberation, currently supporting efforts at food sovereignty, living wage, and the reclamation of unskilled work as in fact so very skilled and essential. Mariah uses she, her pronouns, is a gardener, healer, and teacher at Wildwood Path with ancestry in Iran and Western Europe. She believes that without confronting colonialism, we can never truly be whole or free. Along with stewarding threads of ancestral knowledge by carrying the seeds of medicine plants, Mariah hopes to nourish the seeds of belonging and culture change. Coco uses they, them, is a gender expansive transmasculine Han Chinese immigrant to Turtle Island, generation 1.5. They come from lineages of farmers with memories of ancestral food medicines and daily practices. In their current residency at Northern Grace Farmstead, they are exploring reconnection to ancestral food medicine, handicrafting, and land connection. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Pampi, Coco, and Mariah.
Hi, welcome everybody. While we're waiting and doing our introductions, we welcome you to share a little bit about yourself. Please introduce yourself as your community would call you in the chat. There is a website, which I hope one of us can drop. It's native-ca.land. If you are, sorry, it's native-land.ca, thank you, apologies. Where if you're unfamiliar about the Indigenous people who are stewarding your land, please look that up, take some time to look that up. So please introduce the land and who is stewarding the places that you live in, and an edible plant that you grew up with. Take your time as you're sharing. We welcome you to also find some paper, a journal, a writing utensil, a kitchen herb that you're growing, and seed for inspiration, and get cozy with us. Thank you. So wanted to do a welcome about who we are and how we got together. So thank you, Christy, for introducing us. Mariah, Coco, and I are part of the Wildwood Path that Mariah facilitates in Maine, and it's a nature connection program where we learn how to get closer to the elements. And please take a look at that group. But through working together over the last 1.5 years, we have found some moments of kinship and wanted to explore diasporic herbal transmission. The concept of the herbal transmission is the idea that many of us are from areas or have ancestry in areas that are not native to Turtle Island. And we are looking into sharing that knowledge that oftentimes gets lifted up from different parts of the world because colonization is very much rooted in or influences globalization. But oftentimes when these medicines are pulled, the plant medicine is pulled like that, a lot of the context is missing, and sometimes it's the knowledge is mishandled and actually is not really useful. So as people who are coming from these particular parts of the world, we wanted to not only understand the plant work and the plant knowledge that we grew up with as food medicine, but also figure out ways that we can lessen the burdens on this land that we're in here in Turtle Island, because many of the foods that we're bringing from the cultures that we're coming from may be using more energy because of the locations than what this land supports. So we're trying to find substitutions that can actually center Indigenous growing and Indigenous sovereignty work, because a lot of their knowledge has been pulled and erased. So we want to help. We want to help with that work as diasporic people who are not native to this country. So welcome, welcome. Today we will just open with a little bit of grounding and breath work. It is the first thing in the morning. We're all kind of coming in from different places, so thank you for joining us. In the opening and grounding today, many things are happening across this nation that might be alarming to quite a few people, and we tend to carry a lot of anxiety. And so I wanted to help us just connect with ourselves here on a platform that is, for connection, but sometimes inadvertently is not very connecting. And so we wanted to help I wanted to help you drop into your heartbeat. So please, inviting you to close your eyes with me or keep your eyes nice and soft. And with a deep inhale, filling the belly, rolling your shoulders back so that your shoulder blades are flat against the back, releasing the breath through your mouth. And one more inhale, drawing the air up from the front of your body all the way to the top of your crown of your head. Second breath, filling your lungs, and then exhaling down the back. Release and shake out the breath. One more inhale, filling your belly, drawing the breath from the front of your head, from your front of your body all the way to the crown of your head, and exhaling down the back, shaking it out. Great. Keeping your eyes nice and soft. If you wish to repeat after me, I am safe. I am calm. I choose to be here. Another deep inhale, filling your belly. All the way to the crown, and exhale. I am calm. I am safe. I choose to be here. Slightly opening your eyes, filling your belly, raising your arm as you greet the day. I am safe. I am calm. I choose to be here. Exhale out everything from your belly. One more inhale, bringing the breath from the front all the way to the crown of your head. Exhale. I am safe. I am calm. I choose to be here. Thank you.
So we just wanted
Mariah.
to do, hi, we just wanted to do a quick privilege check, which is just something that some of you may have done before in other spaces, but just to like situate ourselves and be aware of like how you're approaching this work today. And so I'm going to ask you, you don't have to show us, but I'll just show you. So just hold up both your hands as fists, and you can close your eyes, and I'm just gonna say some questions. And then as I'm saying the questions, if you answer yes to the question, you put up a finger. So taking a breath. Do you mostly experience reliable housing? Do you regularly have enough food to eat? Do you have your own transportation? Are you white? Do you have access to mental health services? Do you have access to physical health services? Are you a settler on this land? Do you identify with the gender you are assigned at birth? Do you regularly have more than a couple $100s in your bank account? Are you ever worried about, do you feel you have enough resources to care for your family? So that's just, you can see how many fingers you have up, and you can just look at that and be aware if you have all your fingers up, you know, are situated in a place where you have a lot of privilege, and we just want to acknowledge that we're not all coming to this work from the same place. So thank you for being with us in that complexity.
Thank you, Mariah. So we just wanted to go over some quick working group agreements and guiding principles. Just for the sake of time, we'll just be reading through these, and if anyone has any questions or wants to add something that they feel is important, please let us know at the end. So our working agreements are active learning space and confidentiality. So this just means that we are being mindful of how we'll be sharing what's been said outside of the space. So if anyone has shared something that's vulnerable or personal, we ask that you only share what you took out of what was said and not use any personal identification information. Our next principle is center complexity. So there will be a lot of information and experiences and ways of approaching these topics that might be unfamiliar to you, and we're just asking folks to withhold questions until the end, and after we've had time to present all our information and trust that your questions might be answered. The next one is be open and affirming, curious and creative. Next one is self and community care, which just means we're asking if folks, if you feel any of this content is triggering or just sitting heavy for you, just please take care of yourself. It's okay to step away if you have to. And community care is just a reminder of what Mariah just went through with us with the privilege check, just being mindful of the privileges we're carrying and how we show up in the space together. Next one is spirit of work in progress. Embrace the beginning and expect the unfinished. So as we'll go over later on, this is a work in progress for us, and we're still in the process of exploring these things. Next one is do what you can when you can. And last one is support Indigenous sovereignty.
Right on.
We wanted to talk about how people move and plants move and the complexity in that. And so central to this acknowledgement is that the borders of nation states and empires do not and have never fully contained people. People move around. And just even in this like acknowledgement, like noticing when we say, where are you from? Like, where is your ancestry from? Often what we name or like expect people to name are the name of like a nation state or a country, and the relationship of that with like empire and conquest is not something we can like easily disentangle. And so, you know, within every country or nation state, there have been and are still multiple groups of people living, and national identity is a construction that is often attained through great violence. And sometimes because of that, like we don't know the specifics, right? Like I know that some of my ancestors are from Iran, and I know a little bit about some of the regions, but there's like many ethnic groups in Iran, and I don't know all of that information, right? And so just like knowing how much has been lost and knowing also what we can still recover and find. And as we are like uncovering those layers, like we were thinking about the layers of soil as if your people have been living in the same place for a long time, right? Like you've been tending the soil, they've been tending the soil. And so there's like those layers of like the organic matter in the soil. And similarly, there's the layers of history. And then if you're forced to move or choose to move, or through whatever forces like leave that, you know, how do those layers come with us? How do they get lost? And like what is still there? And so we want to acknowledge in this, like all movement is not voluntary, right? And so I see a lot of people in the chat acknowledging like, I'm a settler, I'm this and that, you know, that's really important to contextualize, because so much of the movement that we see is connected to colonization, to war, to refugees, many people whose ancestors ended up here because of the transatlantic slave trade. And always, of course, acknowledging this displacement and removal of Indigenous peoples from their land. And so regardless of where we like sit on that spectrum, like there's a lot of complexity, and we just wanted to like really center that, because I think a lot of times it's like, oh, like in settler discourse, like, oh, my family like immigrated and they were immigrants, and there's a lot more that goes along with that. So we wanted to acknowledge that, and just like not everyone knows where their ancestors are from as well. You know, if someone is forced, if they're, you know, didn't get to hear those stories, if you know, there's adoption, so many complicated reasons why you might not have access to that information. So that in itself is also a privilege. We just want to like, with that like concentration of power, we want to know like how and where is knowledge hidden, how and where is it passed on, where is it appropriated, where it is assimilated, where it is reclaimed. And so you'll notice like in our narratives that we're going to share, some of us like have direct transmission. And for me, there was like a reclaiming where it's not like a direct family knowledge of some of those plants that was passed on in like a direct way. And so there was like a reclaiming based on some like kind of detective work and finding of clues. And all of those are like valid ways to know things. So let's see, Pampi.
Yes. So, so the first exercise that we will be doing is thinking about where our people are from. And we want to really center the fact that not everybody knows specifically. And we want to make that very clear that that is okay, because that is unfortunately the normal. When you remove people, or when people are forcibly removed, they will not know precisely where they're from. And in thinking about where our ancestry is rooted, we want you to start thinking about the plants that you grew up with. Sometimes, if you do not know where you're from and you don't have that kind of direct transmission, you have to adapt other people's cultures, and that's perfectly fine too. So if a plant or a food gives you comfort, that is the place we're going to start from. And we're going to center that versus knowing precisely where everybody is from. So please feel free to share what you know of where your people are from in the chat. Okay. While you're doing that, Mariah, Coco, and I will go into a little bit about mapping these. So these are to give you some ideas of how we can start to connect, not only how we are coming individually, but when we're friends, how we might be connected. So right now it's me, Mariah, and Coco, and in the map you see a couple regions in Asia and a few regions that's like north of the Middle East, and then to the left in Europe. Okay, so those are the pathways that we are working with. And Mariah was talking about not having boundaries and borders and what that might look like. So some of these images help us to pull out of the nation state qualifications that we often identify. Like I would say normally to someone here in Turtle Island that I'm from India, because the education and historical knowledge and the isolationist of most US public education forces me to hope that people know where India is. And sometimes I have to say Asia and know that people have no idea where even that is. And so that is kind of where we're working at for some of us who are coming from a diasporic perspective. So Mariah was speaking about not having nation states. So we're deliberately looking up maps and identifying regionally where our communities are coming from. So these are some examples. So that one was like a very stark black and white image. Then we have like the topographical region, which kind of gives you an insight of, oh, where Coco is coming from looks kind of mountainous, and where I'm coming from is very much on a bay. And so I already know that things are going to feel different, even what types of plants that we can potentially even grow. We also then went into how our earliest ancestors moved. The darkest brownish colors are almost 150,000 years ago. And the blue and purples are more like 25,000 years ago. And we noted that amongst our group, our subset, Kokomi and Mariah, it seems to be within the 75 to 45,000 years ago, when our ancestors were starting to kind of start to settle in the regions that our communities are coming from. And that also makes it highly likely that at that point, we were more connected biologically. Then we were like, well, since we were within that frame of human movement, let's look at something like the Silk Road, because all of our ancestry is connected to the Silk Road. The Silk Road, as Marco Polo knew it, was already very new, was a later version of the Silk Road. But we've been having versions of the Silk Road for thousands of years before that. The history from where my family is coming from is nearly 5,000 years of empire, and that's empire. Trade routes is to facilitate the movement of materials that we're going to start to see that are cash materials. It allows for building at a higher volume. It allows for transfer of luxury. When you have 5,000 years of empire, that means you have 5,000 years of people who are trying to stay close to the earth, people who are resisting empire. So the notion of empire then gets complicated. It doesn't just start at the transatlantic slave trade. It doesn't just start at European monarchies. There are monarchies and empires that have been happening for thousands of years before that. And when your ancestry is directly connected to these empires, there are privileges and material that you're gaining access to at the expense of people who are living closer to the earth, right? Because the whole point is to pull and extract and colonize. So we can see in this particular map of the Silk Road that all of our ancestry is right on the Silk Road, the oldest forms of the Silk Road.
So next slide, we just want to reiterate what Pampi was explaining, that what happens when we locate ancestry in place and culture rather than national identity, and what happens when we start with what we know. So again, going back to this, and what Pampi brought up, just starting with a food that's comfortable for you, a plant, a folk remedy, a saying, and not necessarily the nation state that your ancestry is from.
So basically for the diasporic herbal transmission, we're starting to get into deeper into how, once we have the context and trying to complicate the context a little bit. We want to note that diasporic peoples are ace adapters. We have to be improvisational. We have to be creative, and we're working with what we have at any moment. And that this ability of diasporic people has thousands of years of history, because human migration has always been happening. So even when we have people located in a particular place, where ancestry is located in a particular place, there's almost always people coming in and out, including our ancestors, from that place. It's a moving place. It's not like a hyper-localized. It is hyper-localized, but it's also moving and fluid. So oftentimes, again, when we're coming from Turtle Island and we're like, oh, my family's from China or my family's from Nigeria, we're thinking that it's a focused place, that it's not moving, it's not changing, because of the ways that the dominant narrative here erases all of our histories from outside. So even just knowing it is like such a thing that we hold on to, that we don't have time to think about the fact that it's also a growing, evolving, responsive space. And so we wanted to complicate that notion. So in talking with each other, we found that we have spice blends that from our families that are sometimes directly transmitted. So in my case, I learned a lot from my father, because he was cooking every day of my life as I was growing up. And there was always this set of spices that he is constantly working with. And I just wanted to just share that as an example of a diasporic experience. I carry the spices with me whenever I'm traveling and moving around, because I can't necessarily think that like everybody's going to have these spices. And this way I bring some comfort with me whenever I am going and visiting someone for maybe a couple of days and I'm supposed to stay with them. So in the 5 spices, we are calling it Panch Furan. Furan is spice and Panch is 5. And we put it together on hot oil with some other materials such as green chili, turmeric, ginger garlic, or red chili, sorry, turmeric, ginger garlic, sometimes even a cinnamon bark, and that becomes tarka. So tarka is this hot oil that is medicinal. The reason why I'm bringing this up right now is because turmeric, for example, oftentimes people are like, oh, you can get turmeric in a pill. Well, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because turmeric is only effective if it's heat activated. So it's very, very important that there's a hot oil connected with turmeric. Otherwise, it's not doing you any good. And so these are the types of knowledge that I grew up with that I didn't realize because I was just watching him cook. But later on, when I started investigating the material properties and why, I understood that the people, my people, or people who influenced my people, putting this together, that was a medicine, that was a science that they had been very, very carefully putting together. And it is the fact that these herbs are always being held together. There's possibly an insight that all of these herbs were grown together. So these are not just like people plucking here and there. These were cultivated very carefully over thousands of years and cultivated in such a way that they're always available, right? So they come up together. They're available together. And this is why it's really dangerous to just like pull a seed from a spice mixture like this and think that it's going to do you any good. This is a way that we push back against monoculture. This is a way we push back against big pharmacy, because these are preventative medicines. It needs to be had every day, consistently, and not as like a, I got sick and I need to use this right now. So please, Coco.
Thanks, Pampi. It's okay. So Pampi kind of went into their section, but we just wanted to show the different food that we were all working with in this for this project, and Pampi went into their 5 spices, and Mariah and I put different central recipes in our ancestry. And so as you can see with some of these, since me and Pampi are so closely related geographically, we share similar spices, such as cumin, ginger, garlic. I mean, it's exactly what they're saying, right? These spices are cultivated together, and even though this is hot pot, even though like where I'm from, this is all made into like a spicy broth, it's still used together medicinally. Like there is medicinal purpose to all these spices. Like this, like hot pot is traditionally used as a way to just combat humidity, and it's eaten in the summer. It's like very spicy. It seems counterintuitive to be eating something so spicy in the summertime in such a humid region, but medicinally, it's like all there to help with you're just living in a humid climate. So we did notice these things that, like, wow, what is the history of these herbs? Like they're so similar. Like we use very similar herbs in our 5 spices, and so obviously this like is an impact of, you know, the early Silk Roads, the human migration.
Yeah, and this was exciting because it helped me understand that my culture is a lot more connected to Coco's culture, and the variations in the spice might be informed by where we are living. So there's the 5 spices and the tadka. So that's the hot oil with the spices that are kind of fried in it, toasted in it. And then you either put the food, cook the vegetables and meat on top, or you make the food and then you pour the hot, beautiful hot oil right on top of it. So either way. And Mariah.
Yeah, so I chose Zatar to work with, and this is something, like I said, it's a little bit, it wasn't exactly a direct transmission, but I had these memories of like my great uncle. We would my mom's side of the family is Iranian and Turkish, and my great uncle, we would like go to this restaurant and he would always like put the sumac. And I was like, I just had that memory of it. And then I was at a Turkish store a few years ago, like it wasn't something I was using, and I saw some, so I bought some and started using it to sprinkle on my food. And then I sort of had this like moment, which I'll talk about a little more later, of like, oh yeah, there's like sumac on the roadsides here. Like I see that plant all the time, and like, is that the same? So I started digging into that. But it's interesting, like in my family, there's some things that were passed down really strongly, and there's some things that like didn't get passed down. So there were certain recipes I was like taught, but this wasn't one of them, but it was like sometimes there or sometimes used, but not really talked about. And it was interesting because I started questioning like what were the things that were passed on and why, as like we were always told like, oh, we're Iranian, but actually there's a lot of like Turkish in the lineage too. And so there was like a certain story about national identity and like what got passed on that way. But this Zatar blend is used all across the so-called Middle East, Turkey, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, Iran. And there's a lot of variation. So there's like always sumac, sesame, and a little sea salt. But then there's like either thyme or oregano or hyssop. Like different recipes have different things. So I started digging into that a little bit more too, and like seeing the regional variations based on that. And for me, it's like reconnecting or reclaiming with this has involved actually like growing and like making and like being involved with like actually really relating to these plants and this blend, and finding the stories and like the relationship that way.
Thank you, Mariah. So what we wanted to introduce right now is not only our local plant hardiness zones that some of us might be familiar with, but the world plant hardiness zones. So here's a slide that kind of just shows how the world maps out. And we encourage you when we're going to get into our little explorations for you to figure out where maybe what the hardiness zones for the location, what your ancestors are coming from, maybe learn a little bit about precipitation, humidity, all of that stuff.
And again, the hardiness zone map is to, further add to this idea that we're not just like stagnant nation states. We're like, me and Pampi are more related because we're on the same hardiness zones, the region of the same hardiness zones. And so I'm going into where I'm from a little bit. I'm from Sichuan, China. We're a very mountainous region. We border Tibet. We're the most western part of China. And so as you can see, where I'm from, it just straddles zones, like several different zones. And it should be grow zone 6A to 10A. And where I'm currently at in Western Mass, we are primarily zone 5B. And in some areas, we get to like 6A, 6B. So there is some overlap. But yeah, where I'm from is much more biodiverse, I guess. We're surrounded by a basin, mountains, the Tibetan Plateau, and rivers. So geographically, it's a bit different. And as I mentioned before, it's a warm, humid climate. And so that's why traditionally in traditional Chinese medicine, we use spicy food a lot. And so the plant I focused on for this series is the Sichuan peppercorn. It's it's just the most fundamental part of any of our cuisine. And it's, I don't know if anyone's ever had it, but it produces like a very numbing sensation. And so we have this thing called, like in hot pot, it's mala. So it's like numbing spicy, and that's the flavor profile of our food.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually, so I have some right here and you can see a picture of it. So it looks like peppercorns, but it's actually not related to the peppercorns at all. It's called prickly ash. I put the scientific name up here, but it's part of a genus of deciduous and evergreen trees. And it's actually in the same family as citrus. So, and it's native to warm, temperate, and subtropical areas. So there's about 250 species of prickly ash worldwide, mostly concentrated in, the more temperate hardiness zones. So all over Southeast Asia, South America, it's very common. And in traditional medicine, it's used for abdominal pain, toothache, eczema. It's anti-inflammatory, antibacterial, and it's actually been used in Western medicine too for treating gastrointestinal problems and respiratory and cardiovascular issues.
Yeah. Thank you, Coco. So the region of Bengal I'm kind of like digging more into being super nerdy about like the ancient history, because I noticed that almost every single one of the spices that is, has been culturally passed down to me is not native to Bengal. And so that already speaks to the fact that we were highly mobile and moving around. And what I realized was this region of Bengal, which is right here, it was considered like seafaring colonialism. So like they were colonizing a lot of the areas because the fleet, boating and I'm sorry. The seafaring voyaging was a really strong point of the people who were living there. So that was an interesting understanding that even as old as Bengal is, like about 5,000 years of civilization, that even at that point, we were already getting spices from other parts of India, mostly. So I will go a little bit into that. We're humid subtropical in the north. We're considered a tropical savanna in the southern portions. Our grow zones are 8 to 10, so it really does not map to Boston grow zones at all. And although we can grow turmeric and ginger and all of these things here, I wanted to note that it still requires a lot of energy to do so. And so I'm trying to figure out what is like a way to grow native plants that might have the flavor profile, the medicinal profile of some of these plants. It might be a lot more plants, But it's an interesting challenge, and I'm excited about what I learn about that. So the plant that I focused on of the 5 spices is Methi. Okay, so Methi is not perennial. It is native to the Mediterranean region and Southern Europe, Western Asia. So I believe that it was probably coming from Western Asia, that brand. The seeds are used in cooking and medicine and to hide the taste of other medicines. And the leaves are ingested as vegetables. Very, very delicious. Methi's medicinal properties is to treat diabetes, menstrual cramps, high cholesterol, and it also helps with increasing libido. So those were some of the food-related properties. It's also used in soaps and cosmetics, which if we look at the skin as an organ, it is very, very important. So it's medicine for your organ. Yeah, it's there are some suggestions that it is preventative for cancer, it's antibacterial and anti-diabetic, but that's not necessarily proven. But again, if you only take Methi by itself, it's not going to be as useful as if you take it with all of the spices it's supposed to be and has been cultivated to be used with. So that's just a little bit of pulling it out of the context, but also making sure that we are working collectively with these plants. Mariah?
So I here's a map just of my ancestral regions, and you can go to the next slide. So I was like doing this research into what is like za'atar, and like there's, because I thought of it as the spice blend, like that's what the spice blend is called, but surprise, surprise, za'atar is also the name of a plant. And so there's all these references to the za'atar plant. And like many things, the name actually like springs from the plant, not from the blend. And so there's a lot of conflicting things like thyme, some places it says thyme, oregano, marjoram, hyssop, and there's regional variations. But some of it has to do with translation, because the first mentions of this are from like 2,000 years ago, in some like ancient Hebrew texts. They talk about this as like a remedy. In other ancient Greek texts, there's mentions of this as a remedy. And so it's really old, and there's a lot of like kind of like folklore around it as well with the medicinal properties. So like there's a lot of like stories of like parents telling their children, like a lot of people who like grew up in like Lebanon or Palestine, they're like, oh yeah, like my mom would say, eat your za'atar like on the day you had an exam, like that will make you like do better on your exam. And one of the interesting things I found, so there's Oregon vulgare, which is like kind of like the common oregano, European oregano. But there's another plant called Oregon syriacum, which is sometimes also called like sacred hyssop. And so I was like, oh, okay, that's where the crossover maybe is. And Oregon syriacum grows especially in Palestine. And here's like where the complications around like the state and empire can come in, because it's now been declared an endangered plant for like the past 40 years. And because it's been over harvested. And this plant, which has been like stewarded by Palestinian people forever, now they're supposedly not allowed to harvest. And there's actually like times when they've confiscated this plant from Palestinians at IDF checkpoints. And so just like that really hit me of like, oh yeah, these plants are still like, we can't separate them from the political reality. Like that is still very much there today. And so my sort of investigation was like, yeah, could I grow this plant? And I did find, I see there's like some questions in the chat about seeds, and that's like a whole other part of the conversation. But sometimes like rare seeds, like poking around, like if you're not able to like go back to your ancestral homelands and like get the seeds directly, there are people that are stewarding some of these rare seeds. So I did find someone in the US that is stewarding Oregonum syriacum, and it would be like more of a perennial in that zone in Palestine, but here where I live in Wabanaki territory in Maine, like it would be an annual. So I'm going to try to grow that this year and just see, along with like the other varieties of oregano and thyme that I have, like how does that plant do here? So there's an experimentation, and yeah, if you just like search for the seeds, like just do some, we're gonna actually have like a little breakout session right now, and so that might be one of the things you could like research if you know some of the plants or the seeds. That's one of the things you can research. So Pampi, did you want to talk more about the breakout session or the research time?
Yeah, we'll just stay all together here. So now we're going to take a little bit of time to explore one of these plants for each of us that has been meaningful to us. So the question is there a plant, spice blend, or ancestral food that you're cultivating a relationship with or would wish to? Let's spend 10 minutes to explore a recipe, comfort food, or medicine related to ancestral plants, plants that are used in your family, plants that you might be excited about that a friend has shared that has become a comfort food. What are the plants that are used? Where did the plants originate? The research tips is to search the plant, recipe, or spice blend name with history, folklore, myth, and then as we added, growing zone, topography. So please take a moment to go where your heart is being moved and explore a plant. And as we give you time to do that, please know that family knowledge is cultural transmission. And if it keeps us nourished, it is sustainable.
Yeah, and you could use this time as well to journal if that felt better. So just some way of connecting. You've already named a lot of amazing plants in the chat. If you want to journal, or just like someone said, they're smelling the essential oil, and just like be with the plant in that way. And if you want to actually like, you know, hop on a search engine and do some of this exploration, and that like folklore tip, like that, I found some interesting things that way, just like in terms of search terms. Like I feel like I've found some like a little bit less generic stories if I search like the plant or the thing plus folklore or plus myth or folk history, those kind of search terms. So you could just pick any of those plants that you've been cultivating relationships with that you maybe want to now go a little deeper with. And we'll just have a few minutes and we'll be quiet, and we'll call you back when we're ready, and feel free to share things in the chat.
But just wanted to share some of the ways that I like to explore. I really love watercolor and ink. And so it helps me when I'm working with plants that sometimes I don't really know, don't have access to the growing process, to like draw them out. Almost like those really famous botanical drawings. So this is just an example of the neem plant, the turmeric plant, and tulsi. As an example. So people have various ways that they are going to be exploring this, and we encourage you to find what moves you. Sometimes it's in a song, the story of our herbs, and singing can really help you connect. So at this point, if people wish to popcorn maybe a couple things that they didn't know that they found out about their plant.
Hi, I was just researching fennel because I grow a lot of it in my yard, and it's great for the bees also, but I mostly harvest the fennel pollen, and I read somewhere it was the spices of the angels, and that's what really connected me with it. But I just realized that it originally grew on the shores of the Mediterranean around Greece and Italy, and that's where my ancestry is from. So I think that's pretty interesting.
That's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Fennel is definitely one of the spices that my traditional food medicine comes from. So I guess I will have to be thanking your ancestors for cultivating that plant. Okay, so thank you for sharing. We're going to just move along for the sake of time. We're transitioning into, now that we're learning a little bit about the plant by itself, maybe within a cultural context, what are the things that we might be doing to lessen the burden on native plants and rematriating native plant medicine? People who have been, who are the indigenous people of Turtle Island, have been here for almost 25,000 years. And so we want to note that there has been just as rich a growing culture here on Turtle Island as any of those of us coming from diasporic places outside of Turtle Island are bringing in. So we're going to present a little bit just to model some of the work that we've been doing. And the first bit of it is asking which ones are native plants? What are the medicinal properties of each plant? And what is the opportunity for substitution or fusion with native plants?
Okay, so I started with looking into the Sumac pepper, and the Sumac pepper itself is obviously not native here, and there was actually it was actually included in a FDA import ban from the 1960s to 2005. And it was included because of the potential to carry citrus cankers, which would just decimate citrus trees here. But so people in the chat were talking about, like, how do you bring your ancestral seeds here? But apparently the ban didn't really affect the Sumac pepper because when we ship it, it's mostly heat treated and dried. And so that doesn't really cause a problem, cause a contamination problem. So it didn't really affect it too much. But what's interesting is that I actually found that there is a variety of prickly ash that's native to North America. And so as in the map, you can see all the areas highlighted in green are where this variety of the prickly ash grows. And it's mostly in Central America. Like Central North America. But I did find that there are some small pockets of it here in Western Massachusetts. So I will be foraging for those. And the North American variety is called common prickly ash or northern prickly ash or toothache tree. And the hardiness zones are 3 to 7, which we are in. And it grows in the underlies of a lot of maple and oak woodlands, which we are in. So I'm curious to see if there are any in the town that I'm currently living in or even in our backyard. And so what I found it was interesting. Well, I think it's interesting that it wasn't used by indigenous folks as food, like as a spice, the way that we use it, even though from what I gather, it's pretty much the same taste profile, but in traditional medicine, it was used for not quite the same purposes. So they did use the berries. The berries were really potent, and they did use it for the numbing effect. And so that's why it's called a toothache tree, because they used it for toothaches. Like they would just chew on the berries or the stems to treat toothaches. They chew on the bark to treat toothaches. And the bark oil was used for similar treatments that the berries are used in Chinese medicine. So, like skin diseases, digestive ailments. The berries were mostly used to treat digestive issues and muscle spasms. And so far, I haven't found that it was used in combination with anything else, which is interesting. It was just used by itself. So yeah, we'll be looking more into this.
That's so excellent, Coco. So I'm going to revisit the Methi or fenugreek, and remembering that it was being used medicinally to treat diabetes, menstrual cramps, high cholesterol, and also support libido. And what was really curious to me is that I found that it's used for a substitution for maple syrup, artificial maple syrup taste. And of course, we're right in the region where there is a prolific sugar maple tapping tradition. And so that was kind of curious. But the medicinal properties, I still need to look a little bit into. And I know that there's that ubiquitous, the red clover and the raspberry leaf. So I'm excited to do a little bit more digging, but it might be multiple plants that here that have the properties of Methi back there.
So I am going to jump over to looking at the sumac, and I have a little Staghorn Sumac here that I'm holding up, and probably most of you will recognize this plant. Roadside prolific, I wrote, because you will see them all over the roadsides. They like to grow in disturbed soils. And so they're actually one of those kind of like so-called pioneer species that will come up in the disturbed soils, and is part of that process of like when the soils are disturbed, that they're one of the species that will come up. And I was curious because this is not the same exact species that's used in the regions from my ancestry in the Middle East. But it does have medicinal uses here. It's used, I mean, it's high in antioxidants. You can make a tea, like a lemonade out of it, where you even just put it in like in the summer in water, and you can make like a sun tea, which is delicious. It's like a tart lemonade type flavor. You can harvest them whenever, but it's better to harvest them in the summer. And I will tell you, I harvested these a little late, and there's some bugs that will live in the middle, and there's like they eat a little bit in the middle. So I only took off when I used the outside layer. You know, I just want to give a little note about like working with the plants and the relationship. Like I always try to make some kind of offering, whether that's a song or a physical offering or something when I go, and to just be with the plant and ask, even for the ones that aren't endangered or are really prolific like this, to just really like cultivate that relationship. And that's something we work on a lot in the Wildwood Path, which is the program where we all met. And so, yeah, I will just say also, if you're interested in collecting the sumac, I'm just going to give my DIY tip, because what you want to eat is like it's like the fuzzy bit on the outside. And when you kind of mix it with the salt and the spices, it gets less fuzzy if you're like worried about that texture. But the seeds are not that delicious. They're very hard. So what I did was like I took off the outside layer of the berries, the little drupes, and I pulsed it in my Cuisinart, my food processor, a couple of times. So then the seeds came separate from the fuzzy bits, and I strained it through like a sieve. And then I'm able to use that to put in my spice blend. Okay, you can go on.
Thank you, Mariah. So now we are encouraging everyone to take about a few minutes to explore native plants that meet the taste and medicinal profile of the plant you just studied. Again, see if it can translate a hardiness zone-wise here, because it can grow in Arizona, but if you're coming from Massachusetts, that might not be the best substitution. Yeah, please take your time and do that. And just wanted to remind you that we all have ancestors who fought to remain close to the earth and to be connected to the earth. And when we last had direct connection to the earth does matter.
And I also just want to say, like, if you are a person who's indigenous to where you're living, like, you can just keep exploring the plant you were exploring, whatever you want. Just noticing that you may, there may be an overlap between the plant you studied and a native plant. So just a little time to explore that, and we'll call you back in a couple minutes.
All right, everybody. I know that this is not as much time as we want, and it might be getting like just thick for you, but we just want to make sure that we close out. So please, if there's someone here who found something interesting that they'd like to share, please do. And again, and at any time, definitely anything you find interesting or discovering, please share on the chat.
Okay, while we're waiting for folks, we also wanted to share some of the books we used in our process. So, I mean, obviously these are not the definitive guides, but we have a lot of herbal books, and so we're able to use these to kind of look into like, Methi treats diabetes. What are some like quote unquote new world plants that also treat diabetes?
Yeah.
And just like
Chinese herbal secrets.
Medicines.
All right.
Northeast Foraging Guide. This is a really fun book if you're
Yeah.
in the area.
Cool. Okay. Well, I see that people are shy, and that's fine, or just thick into their research. But Mariah, please close us out.
Yeah. Do you want to pop us to the next slide? Oh, there we go. Good. Thank you. Yeah. And so we just wanted to connect this always back as well to, the land that we're on here. I'm on Penobscot land here and supporting Indigenous sovereignty and rematriation efforts here. And so, I think that there is the really important component of us having this personal relationship between knowing plants and growing plants in the soil, and that knowledge is really a pathway that can help lead us closer to that connection with the earth, with our ancestry, with all of that. And I think that personal connection, like so much can grow and blossom from that. And then there's also like external relational actions that we can take. So there's really awesome organizations like Eastern Woodlands Rematriation that are just doing really wonderful work around this, rematriating land and plants. One thing that settlers can do is avoid harvesting rare or endangered native plants and fungi. For example, like chaga is a plant that is, or a fungi that is, it's starting to be over harvested in some regions because it's become a bit trendy. And that plant actually has a lot of amazing properties, or that fungi, to fight cancer and all kinds of things. And so, we can be really careful about that and not just like take all of it or harvest those for ourselves. And then, there are other things we can do to connect. So for example, there was like a request from the Wabanaki tribes for herbal medicine for COVID-19 when they had some outbreaks this fall, and they were requesting specific plants. And like a lot of them, like I had gathered and made elderberry medicine. And there was a chaga. I was walking in the woods and this chaga told me, you have to harvest me. And I was like, I don't know about this. But I really felt strongly. And then I got this request for chaga. So I was able, through that, like cultivating that relationship and that listening, to then pass that chaga to that effort through the Wabanaki, which was really wonderful. So there's a lot of things you can do here. How many years for chaga to grow? Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it is a perennial fungus, so it'll grow bigger each year. So like the first year, it might just be like a little knob. The really big ones could be like 10 years old. Sometimes they will continue to grow. Like if you take off part will continue to grow. So there's like ways that you can do it without just like taking all of it or taking all of it in an area. Or only from a dying tree. Yeah, I mean, they are parasitic technically. They do tend to grow on they tend to grow on birch trees, which are one of those species that don't live super long, right? So they're usually, by the time the tree is like getting to be kind of bigger, it may be ending its life anyways. So there's a lot you can, be aware of with that. Like, where is the tree in its lifespan? Where is the chaga? Can you harvest part? Like, is the tree totally dead and the chaga is going to decompose, right? That's a different situation. So it's like being aware of all those bits. Can you do the next slide? And then I just wanted to share like one kind of like really fun and beautiful thing that we've been doing in my community, which is we started doing a salt gathering camp. So as we know, like when we're cooking and making things with a lot of these plants, like salt is often a key component. And we started this camp where we come together for a weekend. We're in our third year. We do it in the fall, and we bring salt from water from the ocean, and we boil it, and we, really do it with a lot of community and prayer. And it's a free event, but we fundraise money. And so we fundraise for 3 different Indigenous organizations. This year, we sent our money to the Mi'kmaq fishermen in Nova Scotia who were under attack as they were trying to exercise their treaty rights to fish and go out lobstering. And so we really try to build relationship that way of like, how can we be doing something where we're in relationship with our environment and the land, and we're able to build relationship and give back, you know, some small way, because yeah, that's where it's at. So just wanted to share that example. There's like a lot of creative things that you can do, and it doesn't have to just only look one way.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, questions. There are people answering questions. We may not be able to get to everyone's questions at this point, but we wanted to acknowledge that we're very glad that this is stimulating conversation and thoughtfulness. Right now, as we are 5 minutes, 6 minutes away from the end of this, we'd like to do a little bit of a wrap up. And if you feel comfortable talking about particular questions that are still sitting with you, please bring it up. And I also wanted to thank Mariah for modeling for us how we can actually be in relationship with the Indigenous stewards of the places that we're living in. You just have to make that effort and show up in what they call in a good way. So please share with us any aha moments that you had during this process, any questions, any thoughts that are coming up. You can, of course, share it on the chat. And please also note that because our chat is full of really important information, you will be able to save it. So because we're on the other end of posting, if Mariah can save our chat, that would be great. There's 3 little buttons on the upper right of where you enter the information and you save. I think there's like the save chat option in that place. So any aha moments?
I loved, this is Tony. I loved your connecting your friendship through the history of your connected spices. It was beautiful to see it, and also just the concept made me really happy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's precisely what we need to be doing, is doing this reclamation in collective. So not only are we getting excited and learning about how we can even be more deeply connected with similarities in cultural trends, but also how we can hold each other accountable. When you have more voices around a table, there might be things that people are thinking about that you're not thinking about, that they help bring you in or pull you back in. If it could be problematic. So we need to be doing this type of work together, because we come together as our plants are grown together. Any other aha moments?
I just wanted to say out loud how grateful I am, and how grateful the ancestors are, all of our ancestors that we can connect with and that we haven't connected with yet, that we are doing this work on this land, how important it is and how necessary it is for all of us, that this is healing for me, this is healing for my grandmother's grandmother, and this is healing for as far back as I can remember. And I thank you deeply.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I wanted to just close out with some embodied breath work, because that seems appropriate. So we invite you to pretend that we have the ability to reach out and with consent, hold each other's hands during this really unknowable time. and to witness, as Greg Watson said yesterday, that whatever is happening now was done by design, and that we can change the design of this to actually support everybody having a chance in this world to live joyfully, abundantly, and be cared for. With an inhale, please fill your belly, raising the breath all the way to the crown of your head. Exhaling. One more time, inhale. Filling your belly. Breath all the way to the crown of your head. Exhale. One more inhale. Shoulders rolled back. Head held high, all the way to the crown of our head.
Aho.
Thank you.
Thank you,
And have a good
everyone,
day.
so much. Happy trails.
Thank you. Please save the chats. Please save the chats for us.
Out
Thank
too.
you.
We're-
Thank
Yeah.
you, Christy. Thank you, Christy and Rafi, for supporting it and like lifting up our prompts in the chat. That really helped us.
Yes, we learned so much. Thank you, all
you,
three of
everyone.
you, and to everyone who attended. There are several links in the chat that we ask you to check out, like the vendor marketplace, the sponsors, and the auction, which all support the conference. And also, as Pampi mentioned, you can get in touch with the presenters. They generously offered their email addresses. So if you have follow-up questions, I think they're open to you reaching out. So thank you all so much once again.
Yeah.
Enjoy the
Thank
rest of the
you.
conference.
Yes, join. Thank you.